Good afternoon, folks, and thanks for joining us. Welcome to the MMA Sucka Podcast. My name is Tim Wheaton, joined as always by the editor at MMA Sucka, Frazer Krohn. How you doing today, sir?
Yeah, it's all good. We're just talking off air now. It's a somewhat chaotic week, to say the least. I wouldn't say that last week's podcast was a waste of time because I always enjoy the conversation, but the boxing didn't happen. Pretty much the MMA card didn't happen as we previewed it. And yet we still got a really good UFC card. Obviously, the boxing card's been postponed. I think it's the 15th of October with the passing of obviously the Queen in the UK. I'm sure everyone's heard about it. So they sort of cancelled all boxing and all football this weekend.
Yep.
But, luckily that's not just been cancelled. That's been postponed until October. But, yeah, the UFC Fight Week, like, I'd go as far as to say like no other, but it's almost like what we've seen before. We've seen this. Maybe not to this extent, but we've seen crazy fight weeks go down in the past, and I'm looking forward to jumping straight into it with you.
Man, we got to talk about the Queen passing away. As we know, this is why everyone tunes in for our Monarchy Watch 2022. This is really why everybody's here. She passed away in Scotland, just up the block, and her body's now at St. Giles Cathedral, so people can go do the open casket there. It's a 12-hour lineup if you want to see her body. So I had friends in line, and they're like, Tim, are you coming down? And I was like, no, it's probably 3 hours. And they're like, yeah, it's 12. I'm not going down. That's a 12-hour wait?
Yeah, it's... Personally, I have, no disrespect, but I have no interest in seeing the casket. I'm not really sure what people are getting out of that just to pay their respects like that, you say. And, people were booking a palace on Thursday evening and all day Friday, probably all over the weekend. But, like I say, it did impact on sort of mainstream sport out of respect. All the football fixtures were cancelled. And
sports, boxing and football. Horse racing and croquet were still active.
For sure, horse racing, cricket, rugby league, that they were all still on, but, it is what it is. And then we've also got, I'm assuming that there's no sort of noticeable big fight cards in the UK this weekend, because a lot of the fixtures have been cancelled this weekend in the football calendar due to police being needed elsewhere for the funeral on Monday. So it is what it is. But I think, do I agree with them cancelling the boxing card? It's a difficult one for sure, but I'm not sure if it was the right thing to do. It's an all-female card. This is in people for our generation, the likelihood of us seeing another Queen is almost zero. We've got Charles, William, and then William's oldest son after that. So it's going to be king for the foreseeable future, at least.
If it even gets that far. We'll see.
Exactly. So, an all-female card, you could have had, you could have put a Union Jack on, this is an idea that I got off another podcast, but, put a Union Jack on every seat. When Savannah Marshall makes the walkout, everyone's, waving the Union Jack. Obviously, because it's a title fight between an American and an English lady, we'd have the national anthem, but it is what it is. It didn't go ahead, and
I agree though. I thought the same thing. I was like, this is an all-female card. It was actually getting people from the inside and outside of sports were interested in this. This was like a major moment in female sports and combat sports and in British sports. I thought this was the weirder one to cancel. If you're going to cancel any of this should be the one that we celebrate. This should be the one that we're looking forward to.
Yeah, for sure. And all fight week they did the open workouts on a boat down the Thames, which is quite.
That's cool.
It's cool. I don't know if I could do it. I like you say, it's cool, but I don't know if that'll catch on, because it's yes, you've got Marshall and Shields, but I think any two people, and they actively don't like each other, but I think any two people who maybe have a little bit more bad blood you're stuck on a boat. If you do an open workout, let's say at the Copper Box. Okay, right. You and your guys go out of that door. You and your guys go out of that door. You're completely separate. You're stuck on a boat for the foreseeable here. If it does kick off, it kicks off big, and you're stuck. But luckily we didn't get that. But what I did think was strange is they got the fighters to weigh in on the Friday, or at least they didn't call it off until the fighters would have been cutting weight for the Friday. On the Friday, it was Friday afternoon, sort of 1 o'clock time that it got called off. Now, for boxing, the weigh-ins are usually around 2-3 o'clock, so they would have been cutting weight at the time.
Okay.
And yet, that's not the weirdest weight cutting situation of the weekend, which is to say something. That is that's to say something. The fact that that's not the weirdest weight cutting, these girls are weighing in almost and not fighting, and that's not the weight cutting story of the weekend, just tells you everything you need to know about the UFC.
What a weird event lead up it was. And it was exciting for people in the media. This was a ton of fun. Refreshing Twitter for like 5 hours on Friday night or Saturday morning, whatever it was. It was a ton of fun. I kind of like those moments. It reminded me back in the day when we had the water throwing situation, or we had the dolly throwing situation. These are just like fun times to kind of be involved in the sport. Yeah, it's stressful and kind of dumb when you get the conclusion. And when you look back, it's also kind of dumb. But it was fun in the moment, wasn't it? It was a good time for the sport. Khamzat Chimaev and Kevin Holland get into a little row backstage. They cancel the press conference for the first time in UFC history. It has never been canceled before. Khamzat then fails to make weight. A bunch of other people failed to make weight, so they shuffled the card. 3 fighters on the card had 3 different fights, 6 fighters on the card now had different fights going in. They had to change the top 3 fights on the card. Coincidental, they were all pretty close to weight, which was a big surprise. And I think we got better fights in the end. I think those were genuinely a better match fight. Like you were talking about the Kevin Holland one. We all knew the conclusion going in. It was maybe worse than I expected it to be. But yeah, let's talk about it. Let's go into it. Do you want to start at the main event, or do you want to talk about how weird Fight Week was?
Yeah, Fight Week. From Khamzat supposedly going to the airport to meet Nate Diaz off the plane, like he'd do anything in an airport. Everyone's talking about this gangster life and this gangster this and gangster that. You're not going to do anything in an airport. Even if what are you going to do if Nate Diaz comes off the airport? What are you going to do? Shout at him?
Yeah,
you're not going to do anything when there's not just security, but sort of real life police, as it were. You're not going to do anything in an airport, and it makes for a good little segment on the embedded. Aside from that, come on. And then,
well, like Li Jingliang said, it's like, what are you guys doing? There's on Saturday you get a fight for money. Why are you fighting now? What are you doing? Li Jingliang, full of wisdom.
Go to Fight Week for me, Li Jingliang. But we'll go on to him in a minute because, oh God, my heart breaks for him. But so then going ahead to the press conference again, Li Jingliang, we saw him. He had the nice suit. Can't wait to wear my suit at the press conference. Never gets to go. Never gets to wear it at the press conference, And for me, we've seen what they've released on the sort of pre-fight. We didn't see it on the embedded, which was surprising. I thought that embedded could have done huge numbers, but we saw on the pre-fight sort of package that they threw together on Friday night, the sort of backstage antics. Whether we're seeing the whole thing or not, I'm pretty sure we've seen worse.
I've seen worse. Yeah, I think like Savannah Marshall and Clarissa Shields were maybe doing just as bad to each other.
Exactly, and you can't tell me that when Usman and Ben Askren almost squared off, and we've seen Nate Diaz at multiple press conferences. John Jones. All these people that actively dislike each other.
What about when Kevin Lee and that one guy don't talk about my
Chiesa? Yeah, Michael Chiesa, and they almost went at each other whilst on stage. Yeah. I think, and even and it's always going to be an issue. I think I put something out on Twitter about it, or I was discussing it with a friend. These guys are going to fight each other. They don't. Yeah, sometimes they have a genuine dislike for each other, and they're just backstage, just wandering around. No security there, and when I worked at the PFL a few weeks ago. You had Pacheco and Kayla Harrison pretty much in the same fighters lounge.
Yeah.
Now these two are professionals, so you're all right. They fought each other before. They're going to fight each other again, and we know that's going to happen. We had Bubba Jenkins and Brendan Loughnane. Luckily, they're friends, but they're going to fight each other. There was not a single member of security around the fighters there. They had each team had their teams, 3 or 4 people at the time. But it does make you question if like we saw on was it Wednesday night or Thursday night, the press conference obviously called off. Where's the security there? Because we've already seen earlier on in the week Kevin Holland and Darren Till going back and forth. So there's already that little bit of needle. Then you've got Khamzat going back and forth with Kevin Holland and being able to get close to him enough to supposedly throw this kick at him. I'm lost for how are we allowing this to happen? Because, it should be right. Fighters in the blue corner will stay in this section and file in from the left-hand side. Fighters in the red corner stay in this section, file in from the right-hand side. We've got Dana in the middle, 2 security behind him, just on the off chance anything kicks off.
Yep.
If they want to shout at each other whilst they're backstage, that's fine, because we'll have security back there and we'll have these guys stuck here and these guys kind of stuck here. Then they can shout at each other on the stage and big up the fight. Happy days. And yeah, that didn't happen. They were seemingly just all together backstage, and it's, it is what it is. But like I said, from the footage that's been released, it's
not that bad.
We've seen worse. Yeah, we've seen worse. But
yeah, it was a weird one. But I think Kevin Holland was Li Jingliang we all like, but I think Kevin Holland, when you take a step back and like leave the drama of the sport that we live in, Kevin Holland talked his way into a much bigger spot. And yeah, he got embarrassed, but essentially his mission worked. He trash talked the bigger star on the card. He trash talked the main event fighter and then got the fight. He got promoted to that fight. Kevin Holland, you did what, like, he had the most effective trash talk. He succeeded in what he was doing. Lost, whatever, but got the fight.
But Big Mouth is what Big Mouth does what Big Mouth's going to do. Kevin Holland, like you say, he sort of talked his way into a bigger fight. And with the greatest respect to D-Rod, the casual fan will not have heard of Daniel Rodriguez.
No.
The casual fan will have heard of Khamzat Chimaev, without a doubt. He's all over, especially this week, he's all over the place. So for Kevin Holland to then say, look, I'm taking a fight with this undefeated killer, he's a terrible stylistic matchup for me.
Yeah.
Why not? Fair play. And although Dana said, oh yeah, we're not paying these guys anymore.
I don't think that's true. I think they were trying to get people in the future, like fighters, to know, like, this isn't what we normally do. We don't negotiate 24 hours out. In reality, they all said in the press conference, like, yeah, I got paid way more. Nate said he couldn't even count how much more money he was making. Like,
exactly. So, Dana can come out, like you say. I think it is alluding to other fighters, irrespective of whether there's a fighter in and around the same weight as you. Don't miss weight. And for Khamzat, I don't think he missed weight. I think he just gave up trying. I'm not sure how much I buy this, that the doctors told him to stop. I imagine the doctors did tell him to stop, but he was 178.5 pounds. He didn't just miss weight. He was miles overweight. Even though the doctor told him to stop cutting weight, he was still, and the doctor supposedly told him to stop cutting weight about an hour before he weighed in. He's not cutting 8 pounds in an hour, and I've heard that he was up for 30 hours, cutting weight from before that. If in 30 hours you can't get down to even in and around the same way, and he didn't look like a bag of shite on the scales, even he didn't look sunken, his face didn't look sunken. Maybe that is because he was sort of forced to rehydrate a little bit by the doctors, but it's certainly interesting. And he gives all this gangster this.
His coach gave a different story. His coach said the physician didn't even talk to us. It was our decision. So like we're hearing different things here.
Yeah, exactly. And he gives it all this gangster this and gangster that, and don't deny that he is a gangster when it comes into the octagon. But I saw a tweet from Neil Magny saying, well, I've been in the UFC for how many fights? Doctors never come to just randomly check on me.
No.
And I think something needs to be done with the weight cutting, because on this for the main card, the original main card, Diaz, Chimaev missed weight. You then had, going further down the card, Irene Aldana versus Macy Chiasson. That was changed Thursday night, because Macy wouldn't have been able to make the weight. That was changed to a catch weight of 140. You had Chris Barnett miss weight at heavyweight.
Somehow.
That is huge. The heavyweights don't miss weight, and that isn't being talked about at all. And then Hakeem Dawodu came in pretty heavy for a featherweight fight.
But even the Kevin Holland one was a catchweight fight, even before they started cutting weight. Weeks ago, they thought, I'm not going to make it.
Exactly. And I think obviously that one was on short notice, so maybe you can sort of forgive that a little bit more with,
sure.
I know I'm not going to make the weight, but why not make it 175? Why accept the fight and then say, I can accept the fight, but I'm going to have to fight 10 pounds over? It's questionable. But, like I said, with Khamzat, I wrote a piece on MMA Sucka, sort of a bit of a matchmaking piece, and I I matched him up with a welterweight next. We'll go on to talk about what's next for Khamzat after we talk about the fight itself. But now his coach has come out and said, yeah, his next fight will be at middleweight. Well, with the greatest respect, we can't just be, I can't make welterweight anymore, so I'm just going to jump straight in a middleweight contender. Well, that shouldn't be the case. You signed up to a welterweight fight months ago, and it's Khamzat has ruined this fight week. You know, there was points on Friday night, Friday evening, where there was potentially not going to be a fight card.
Yes,
you know, Nate Diaz. Enough respect to Nate Diaz. Yeah, I'm not going to take that fight. Why? He's clearly not taking it seriously. It's an awful matchup for me anyway. People think that I'm going to get battered, and then you come in, 7.5 pounds? Because it's obviously non-title fight, so 7.5 pounds overweight. No, I'm not taking that fight. Tony Ferguson, realistically, is the guy that saves this fight card.
Yes.
Because Khamzat Chimaev versus Kevin Holland isn't a pay-per-view main event, in my opinion. Tony Ferguson signing up saying, yeah, I'll fight Nate Diaz on 24 hours notice. And Nate Diaz saying, Tony's an OG of the game. I'll take on Tony Ferguson, a completely different stylistic matchup for me. And the same with Kevin Holland. Yeah, I'll take on Khamzat Chimaev.
Yeah.
Completely different stylistic matchup. And Li Jingliang, yeah, I'll take on the guy that's 10 pounds heavier than me.
No problem.
Luckily for Jingliang, Tony and Daniel Rodriguez are both strikers, but nobody strikes like Tony.
No, he's unique.
And yet, we still got... We're lucky to have had 5 main card fights, all of which were good fights.
Yes.
With that being said, this time last week, 4 of the fights on that main card weren't meant to be what they were. The catchweight fight between Aldana and Gierson, and then the three sort of top fights on the card, as it were.
Yeah.
It was a mess of a Friday, and like you say, for us in the media, it was great because constantly checking your phone, updating Twitter, trying to talk in the MMA Sucka group chat, say, have you guys heard a different journalist saying Khamzat's not going to make weight about an hour before? What does this mean? Or is he going to cancel it? Well, Kevin Holland's weighing it, and it was exciting, but it's just carnage, and luckily now we can go on to sort of almost put Friday and fight week behind us and go forward and talk about Saturday night, because it was a really good fight card in my opinion.
Oh yeah, we'll start right from the top. A better main event because you got 2 old dogs, 2 old veterans, both kind of fighting up in a weight class that they shouldn't be. I genuinely, and have never minded this, the UFC doesn't like this style of the old man's fight league, but if you're going to do stuff like Robbie Lawler, Nick Diaz, and other stuff like that, I really don't mind the idea of an old man fight league, just legends of the game doing stuff, especially when you see them fight. Both of them would have got clobbered in their fights. Both of them look so old and so bad in there. And this was a fair fight. This was 2 guys at the same point of their career, and it was a well-matched fight given that. Tony was doing Tony things. He just moved to Jackson Winklejohn. I'm not sure how good that was because they kept saying don't turn around. His whole fight game is spinning elbows. Like, what do you mean don't turn your back? That's all he does. Nate, a good timing on his counters and that sort of stuff, just a little bit more power, popping those punches. I don't know how much more analysis one can get out of that. Like what do you think, Frazer? What did I miss in the fight here? What else? What did you see?
I think you pretty much nailed it there. I think I don't mind. Like I'm like you. I don't mind this sort of old guy versus older guy who, realistically, you're talking are never going to compete for a title again. No. Crazy to think that Tony Ferguson's never going to be in the title picture again after the sort of run that he went on, but it is what it is. And I like Tony at welterweight. I don't mind Tony at welterweight. Why cut that weight at his age? I think he's 38, 37 maybe. Mm-hmm. And why cut that weight when you don't have to, and drain the brain, as it were. Yeah, coming off that huge knockout loss to Michael Chandler, and he took a beating against Justin Gaethje. So why do that to yourself? And he has competed up at welterweight before. So if I'm Tony Ferguson, I don't think his stock only was raised in this one. It didn't drop at all.
I agree. Because even though he lost, he actually didn't do. And I'm kind of selling him short. He didn't do terribly in this fight. He wasn't
not at all. I mean, he went in and took the game plan that everyone should take. The RDA and Conor McGregor 2 blueprint against Nate Diaz is just absolutely brutalized that leg. And I thought I think it's the 3rd round or the 2nd round when he hits Nate with a Nate's all the weight going through that
Yep.
lead leg in that boxing style that we know Nate prefers, and Nate visibly sort of shouted out and winced. I thought any more of those, and it might be go time for Tony. But I think
there
obviously
was moments where I thought Tony's taken away with this fight here, but
for
no,
sure. And I mean, the scoring I think was strange because you had people, when you watched the broadcast, you obviously got the tweets coming up in the bottom left, and some people had it 3-0 Nate, some people had it 3-0 Tony, 2-1, 2-2 going into the 2-1 either way going into the fourth.
Mm-hmm.
I think the best thing about this fight, and I know it sounds ridiculous, but the best thing about this fight was the guillotine. That how quickly you could tell that Nate had trained to be taken down essentially and looked to wrap her neck straight away. And that's a stylistic matchup that Khamzat brings with him, I know Tony probably made a mistake with leaving his head in there, but the speed in which he snatched that guillotine and then hid his own hands, sort of, he almost went all the way around the neck and sort of, just the way that the guillotine, it wasn't a normal guillotine where the hands are underneath where, Tony could fight the hands. Tony would have had to reach all the way behind his own head to even try and fight the hands whilst being choked. It was an absolutely phenomenal submission.
What about psychologically, where this man has never tapped out in his career? The arm bars, he was willing to break his arm against Charles Oliveira, but he's willing to tap out to a guillotine against Nate Diaz. Psychologically, is there something here that we can analyze, or are we reading too much into these kinds of things?
I think you can. Maybe it's just the Nate Diaz Gracie squeeze that he's got, and
How much better? It could be that.
You perhaps Tony's got a higher pain threshold than he has a panic threshold, as it were. You can have your arms stretched and hyperextended, but as soon as you start to stop the ability to breathe, you might just panic straight away. It is what it is. But
it happens.
Nate locks that in, gets the tap, a single arm sort of flex to the crowd, just vintage Nate Diaz. And this time last week, if you would have told me that that would have been the final sort of picture from the weekend of Nate Diaz flexing with his arm up, having choked out Tony Ferguson.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if we could ever do this podcast again, because I'd be saying, well, Tim needs to retire from the sport. There's no chance that's going to happen, and it's just a phenomenal, just that picture, lying on the ground. And then you see the two of them bowing to each other, hugging, shaking hands. It's just really fresh to see, to be honest. And, it's just how you want Nate Diaz to go out. You don't want Nate Diaz to have gone out being absolutely battered by Khamzat Chimaev. And I think it's a fitting way to end what is a phenomenal career for Nate Diaz in the UFC, at least.
In the UFC, at least, most likely in the UFC. And I agree with you. It's nice to see him get a win over an opponent that he was well matched, rather than see him get pummeled by some young, hungry, undefeated, massive, middleweight fighter. But yeah, and seeing also one thing, did you also get the feeling watching this fight of like how much better this would have been if they were both in their prime? Both of them like 2015 or something like that. Just wow, there was moments in this fight that could have been so good if both these guys weren't 800-year-old. These guys have taken so much damage over fights as well. Both of them have taken way too much damage. Just I don't know, one of those great fights that we maybe missed out on because it was 7 years too late.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that we finally got it, but
it was fun.
With that being said, yeah, I completely agree with you. You could see that they were both off the pace. I mean, I think it was the third round or second round where Nate just walked away shaking his head like, oh, I need a break. And then with about 5 seconds to go in one of the rounds, I'll have to rewatch it. But he just 2 hands up on the cage like, fuck it, I can't be asked. And why not? I think after the career that these guys have had, and the main events that these guys have put on, the shows, the performances, the upsets, the wins. If you want to fight for 4 minutes 55 of a round, you fight for 4 minutes 55 of a round. Who are we to judge you, and who are we to tell you that you can't? I think it was vintage Nate Diaz, and luckily we got vintage Tony Ferguson with the spinning shit, and he does that sort of run-in low kick, and that obviously worked well against Diaz. But I completely agree. If we would have seen this fight 5 years ago, 7, 8 years ago, I think it would have been a much better fight, because these look like two two guys on losing streaks who, Nate is a lazy lightweight and Tony's obviously moving up.
Yeah.
There was, you can tell the difference between sort of two hungry fighters in the Irene Aldana Macy Cheerson fight who are still fighting to put on a show to try and
let's
try and get into that title picture.
Good fight. This swings in that fight, wasn't it?
I mean, luckily, unluckily for Aldana, there's so much that went on this fight card that I think we've almost got to sort of glaze over it slightly. But what a first round! She almost breaks the arm of Cheerson, and then Cheerson just comes back with an absolutely dominant second round.
We're talking 10-8 one way, 10-8 the other way, potentially.
For sure. I mean, I wouldn't have minded it going to the judges for once. I wouldn't have minded it going to the judges because I would have been so intrigued to see how. Because even Aldana, I think, was losing that last round, and then she just that heel up kick lands on the liver with the heel, and I was watching it and I saw it. I was like, oh, and I had to go back, and I had to go back, and I had to go back. I was like, well, what's landed here? I thought maybe because Cheerson obviously stood up.
She put her arm down like between her legs, so we all thought it was
some sort of shoulder injury, or maybe that and because she stood up out of the guard of Aldana, and then obviously she throws the up kick and it lands on the liver, and then she just sort of crumbles. And I thought maybe she'd hurt herself in the transition on the floor. But when you see that heel connects with the liver. And I mean, fair play to her. She throws an up kick, she lands it, she knows she lands it, she gets up, her opponent's on the floor. She could have just got pounded on her, and she didn't need to.
Irene didn't know what was going on either. She didn't know
without a doubt, without a doubt. She can claim like, yeah, I knew that landed up and drilling that. You haven't been drilling. No one's drilling an up kick with the heel.
Like she had to ask, like, what's going on right now?
For sure, and I think I alluded to it on I did a betting tips piece. Irrelevant now because a lot of the fights didn't happen, but it is what it is. But I spoke about Aldana being quite a rarity in the women's sort of division. She finishes fights. We looked down. Yes, her first 4 UFC fights all went the distance, but that included 2 fight of the nights. She then got an armbar submission against Betchka Hare.
Yep.
She went to decision twice, but then she got that huge knockout over Ketlin Vieira. Then she went to decision with Holly Holm, where she was just outworked along the fence. But then she knocked out Yana Kunitskaya and now knocked out Macy Cheerson. I want to see her against Amanda Nunes next. That, for me, is the fight to make. And if it's not Amanda Nunes, it should be Juliana Pena in the number 1 contenders. Yep. I don't have an interest in seeing Juliana Pena versus Amanda Nunes next because that second fight wasn't competitive at all. Yeah. But on paper, they're 1-1. So, does she have to sort of make her way back into a title shot? If Juliana Pena, I think so, and I think Irene Aldana's potentially the perfect opponent for that. They'll both have to take some time out because Aldana did take a beating in that second round. I mean, if we just look at the stats here, ironically, they're kind of even, the stats, but total strikes in the second round, Macy Cheerson 50 strikes, Irene Aldana 16 strikes. And then in the first round, Aldana almost doubled the amount of total strikes. Well, over doubled the amount of total strikes, 29-13. So that just shows how much of a back and forth fight it was. And it was a quality fight. I mean, I think
stuff like that, there was a lot going on.
I think if Tony and Nate hadn't put on such a good fight, that was fight of the night for me going into it.
Oh, I agree.
You can't give Khamzat fight of the night because it wasn't a good fight. It was an absolute domination from Khamzat Chimaev.
And we haven't seen Kevin Holland get dominated that bad. We expected Kevin Holland to lose because it's his weakness. Sure. He did scramble fairly well for one phase. There's just like we talk about in striking all the time, there's layers to it. If a guy knows the third layer, you're going to lose to that guy. And scrambling's the same way. If you're getting 2-3 layers deep, sometimes you just don't know enough to keep going. Khamzat knows those like 5th layers. He was undefeated in national wrestling in Sweden for whatever that's worth. And no one's beaten Kevin Holland this bad.
No, for sure. I mean, I don't even know if it was a terrible beating for Kevin Holland because he almost didn't put up a fight. He was just
zero strikes landed, 0 strikes. There's 0-0.
0 strikes thrown is insane. The 0 strikes landed. You you could argue that he was focusing on sort of covering up and not trying to receive too much damage. 0 strikes thrown. This is a guy that's knocked out Jacare off his back.
Yeah.
This is a guy who is, I'm pretty sure he's a black belt in BJJ, Kevin Holland. And a lot of people are talking about the fake glove touch from Chimaev. I'm not quite sure if he went for the glove touch at all. We saw Kevin Holland obviously with the hand out. At no point did I see Khamzat go across with his hand out to indicate a glove touch. So I'm not too mad about that. It is what it is. And these guys clearly don't like each other. Yes, they touched gloves when they were brought together in the center of the octagon, but it's a fight at the end of the day. These guys fought backstage, so it's like, did you really expect Khamzat? On my keys to victory for Khamzat versus Diaz, which didn't quite go to plan, to say the least. But you can pick bits. I said attack the legs of Diaz. That's what Tony did.
Mm-hmm.
Work in the clinch, and that's what essentially Khamzat did. But it in that piece, it alluded to how quickly Khamzat goes for the takedown.
Yep.
Against Li Jingliang, Lee threw a huge right hook, and Khamzat snatched him straight away. Against John Phillips, same thing. Against Rhys McKee, same thing. One of his brave fights, same thing. Against Gilbert Burns, although I don't think he completed the takedown originally, same thing. He shoots within the first 5 seconds every single fight.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely, consistently.
So what do you expect if you're Kevin Holland? If I was Khamzat Chimaev, I would have probably stood with Kevin Holland for at least the first 5 minutes to try and gain a few fans back, because the fans were not happy with Chimaev at all.
No,
he missed weight. He was sort of flipping them off at the weigh-ins, and rightfully so. Fans travel far and wide to go and see Nate Diaz versus Khamzat Chimaev, and then Chimaev kind of ruins that. But then he puts on a performance like that against Kevin Holland. Gentle reminder: Kevin Holland was on a 2-fight winning streak and looked phenomenal in those 2 fights. Yes, he's a slightly slow starter, but he looked phenomenal in those 2 fights against Tim Means and Alex Oliveira. A big drop off in competition to Khamzat Chimaev, but Chimaev didn't even allow him to get going at all. Clearly, with 0 strikes landed. But this is now his 4th UFC fight where an opponent doesn't land a single strike on him.
He's rising to the occasion. He's actually getting better the better opponents that he's gotten.
I mean, nobody has got statistics like those. We all talk about Conor McGregor's rise to the top from yes, Alex Pereira and Jiri Prochazka have, Jiri's obviously got the title. Alex has got the title shot in a couple of months. But these are guys with big backgrounds outside of MMA, or outside of the UFC, at least in Jiri's case. For Khamzat, he was 8-0 when he entered the UFC, and he is just a wrecking machine.
Yep.
John Phillips, 1 strike landed against him. Rhys McKee, Gerard Meerschaert, and Li Jingliang nobody landed a glove on him. Then you've got the slight outlier against Gilbert Burns, where Gilbert landed 119 strikes on him. But then against Kevin Holland, no strikes landed on him. I mean, I do hate to say it, and I don't want to sort of, because I think Khamzat Chimaev is arguably the best prospect that we've ever had in the UFC as far as star power and being able to absolutely just wreck people.
Yeah.
But if you look at the matchups, then they're all favourable matchups. Aside from Gilbert Burns, John Phillips let's remember, Phillips was preparing for Dusan Todorovic in that fight.
Yep.
Todorovic is a striker. John Phillips then has to take on a wrestler. John Phillips, notorious for having poor wrestling. I think in his debut in London, he took on Charles Bird, and Charles Bird just took him down, dominated him, and choked him out. He then faced Kevin Holland, choked him out. He then faced Jack Marshman, lost that. He then got a 17-second knockout, but then, he was dominated in 2 further fights. Then, he's got poor takedown defense. In a word, John Phillips has got poor takedown defense. Rhys McKee, we're all going, Khamzat, 8-day turnaround. Oh, how good is this? Rhys McKee also took that fight on short notice. He wasn't even in the UFC. He had to travel over to Abu Dhabi. He had to go through all of that, and is also not notorious for his takedown defense. Gerard Meerschaert just stood in front of Khamzat and kind of shit his pants, to be honest, hence the 17-second knockout. But Li Jingliang, not brilliant takedown defense. We've seen him dominated on the floor by Neil Magny, I think Jake Matthews did really well on the floor against him. So his losses come when he's dominated on the floor, Li Jingliang. And then the first person that could kind of hang with him on the floor, Gilbert Burns. That's when you seem to see a lot of back and forth in a Chimaev fight. And then Kevin Holland, you would have thought Kevin Holland could sort of show him something different on the floor, but that's a 1 in a million fight in my opinion. You say that, and yet he's done it 4 times. But you very rarely do you lose a fight not landing a strike and not throwing a strike, having a strike thrown at you and you not landing a strike. But I think Chimaev is now the UFC's biggest star, in my opinion. But can you trust him? Can you trust him to headline an event?
No, probably not.
Realistically.
I don't. Yeah, he's got that John Jones-esque, like something weird is going to happen during fight week.
For sure. And I think, I haven't seen anything about Khamzat being fined this week because the fight was fought at catchweight. If he's not fined,
he's got a bonus, if anything.
I give up. If he's not fined,
he's not fined. He's not.
I can't. You can't come in 7.5 pounds over your contracted weight and just conveniently face someone else because they're the same weight and not get fined. He's been essentially rewarded for missing weight.
Yeah.
He's being rewarded because everybody else on the card is a gangster and will just fight anyone at any time. Tony Ferguson, Nate Diaz, completely different fight. Kevin Holland, completely different fight. D-Rod and Beach.
Not only did he not get fined, he got paid more for doing what he did. He got a bonus in the back room.
And I think the only thing, the only thing that he's going to be sort of maybe a little bit pissed off about how fight we went is the fact that he wasn't the main event.
Yeah.
But he missed a huge opportunity. He could have taken, you beat Kevin Holland, and those in the know that Kevin Holland's wrestling is amateurish in comparison to the guys that he's faced.
Yeah.
He's a much smaller man, Kevin Holland. Yes, he weighed in heavier, but naturally he's a smaller man. He was never really a middleweight. We've seen him not struggle to make welterweight at all since moving up. Chimaev had the opportunity to steal Nate Diaz. Nate Diaz is limelight. Go on then and just absolutely say, look, on the mic and just say, look, I'm the man. Nate Diaz done. He's killed. I want Leon Edwards or Kamaru Usman next.
Yeah.
But you can't trust him. You can't trust Chimaev now to make 170 or 171 or 170 pounds. And I alluded to in my matchmaking piece, I don't want to see him at middleweight because he can make welterweight. He's just, he got this week completely wrong. He was slightly lazy with it, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to see him fight Colby Covington, someone who has got takedown defense, someone with, arguably the best gas tank at 170.
I agree.
Someone that will look to take him down, someone that will not be scared to strike with him. It's the fight to make. If Khamzat isn't fighting Colby Covington next, I'm really not interested in who Khamzat fights next. Realistically, if you look down the rankings,
I was trying to find anyone interesting that would have been, but yeah, Colby. It has to be Colby.
It has to be Colby. Kamaru Usman and Leon Edwards more than likely are going to face off again.
Mm-hmm.
At the beginning, for probably January, February time next year. I don't think Kamaru will be ready for the end of the year, and that will more than likely be in the UK. Then you've got Colby, then you've got Khamzat. We've already seen the Gilbert Burns fight. Bilal Muhammad versus Sean Brady's going down on the next pay-per-view, I believe.
Yeah.
No offense to Bilal Muhammad, I think he's got a great social media presence, but he's not a big star. Neither Sean Brady, Jeff Neal, not a big star. Stephen Thompson, dreadful stylistic matchup. And then you're talking that Jorge Masvidal, Vicente Luque. A fight that I'd make in 3 or 4 years, Shavkat Rakhmonov. I think that'll be a phenomenal fight.
Yeah, we all love him.
Unfortunately, he's not a big enough name at the moment for Khamzat to fight. Because like I say, I think Khamzat's probably the biggest or top 3 biggest stars in the UFC, especially after this week.
And you don't want to.
Covington is the fight to make.
I agree. You don't want to knock off like 2 up and comers. You don't want to knock off like Shav.
Exactly.
You don't want to stop the momentum behind either man. Shavkat is undefeated, 16-0 at this point. Like, that's awesome. Let's not change that.
Yeah,
Khamzat,
for sure.
it has to be the fight. And I think the best part about Colby is that he will trash talk him. He's not scared to, he's going to trash talk him. But Colby also doesn't know very much about the world. He doesn't know anything about the Chechnyan war. So he will say dumb things because he doesn't understand what was happening.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I mean, that the fight week alone sells pay-per-views. You put why Colby hasn't already come out and said something? He might have. I've missed it personally, but he needs to be on Twitter and on Instagram every day saying, "I want that." Let's be honest, Colby's going to call him fat because he missed weight by so much. I want that fat Chimaev and this and that. It's the fight to make. I don't want to see Khamzat versus Leon Edwards because I don't think he's proven that he can. First of all, he's got one win against a guy in the top 15.
Yeah.
It's a hard sell. It's a title fight is a hard sell. You talk about Leon Edwards, who's had to go on a 9-fight winning streak in the UFC just to get a shot.
Yeah.
Khamzat's only win is over Gilbert Burns, and even some people think that he didn't even win that. If he now fights Colby Covington, who is the clear number one contender, or aside from Usman, so the number 2 guy, I'm not really considering Usman and Edwards in this conversation because, like I say, I think they just need to rematch in the trilogy fight. Colby's the fight to make. Make the Colby fight. And if you're worried about Chimaev, have Gilbert Burns versus the winner of Bilal Muhammad versus Sean Brady on the let's for argument's sake, the higher ranked guy, Bilal Muhammad beat Sean Brady. Have that as a 3-round fight on the card. Have Gilbert Burns. So Gilbert Burns versus Bilal Muhammad. It's a fight that makes sense. 2 guys highly ranked in welterweight. Colby versus Khamzat. Then if Khamzat doesn't make weight again, you don't do any of this special treatment again. You just pull him from the card and you put Gilbert Burns or Bilal in against Colby. It's the fight to make. Colby Covington is the fight to make. UFC, Dana White, it's the fight to make. I know you watch every week because we always shout you out.
Every week.
Dana, listen to me and Tim. Colby Covington, Khamzat Chimaev. That could even be a pay-per-view main event. Colby Covington is going to sell probably as many pay-per-views just trash talking as Nate Diaz. Nate Diaz didn't do an awful lot of trash talking pre-fight this week.
He didn't seem to know how it was.
Exactly. And, that is the fight to make. If you look at the middleweight rankings, I've got no interest in seeing Khamzat fight. He already said that he wouldn't fight Robert Whittaker. And he unfortunately, he just dominates everyone at middleweight,
I think so, too. It's a striker's division with,
we've already seen him out wrestle Jack Manson, who is one of the better wrestlers in that division. Sean Strickland, notoriously not great at wrestling. Paulo Costa, got no interest in that. Even after these fight week antics, I've got no interest in that.
That might be the next fight.
But I think the whole talk about Paulo Costa versus Khamzat Chimaev would be, or can Paulo Costa land on him? Well, even if he can, he might land on him, but he's probably going to be taken down.
Yeah, probably.
Derek Brunson's got decent wrestling, but he just hasn't got enough to trouble Khamzat.
Yeah.
Obviously, Alex Pereira, striking sensation, but the speed in which Khamzat shoots on you isn't going to make that fight competitive, in my opinion. I think he just, he could probably even pull guard against Pereira and still end up on top. Vittori and Jared Cannonier, not a lot of interest. The most interesting fight is Robert Whittaker, but Whittaker, Khamzat's come out and said, no, I like Robert Whittaker. I probably won't fight Robert Whittaker. So it's, it's a difficult one, but it's not at the same time. His manager said our next fight's probably at middleweight. Make the Colby fight. Accept that the Colby fight is the one to make.
Because Colby will throw volume striking and actually push Khamzat back, which no one has been able to do. What does he look like on the back foot? Gilbert Burns couldn't even do it. Well, what does he actually look like on the back foot? What does he look like when he's being pressured? And I think Robert Whittaker is not that kind of fighter because he's a great counter striker. He never did that to Yoel in the prime of his career. And that's what makes it. I might pick Robert Whittaker in that fight, but the Colby one actually interests me. I'm interested to see how he handles, if someone can counter his wrestling, if someone can push him back. That's an interesting matchmaker fight. Probably not going to see it. I think it's going to be Paulo Costa, honestly.
I think, because the timelines work out as well. Paulo obviously fought, 3 4 weeks ago against Luke Rockhold. Did take a little bit of damage in that fight, so he's obviously got to heal up. Khamzat's got to deal with, Khamzat's body inside is probably pretty messed up. If he had such a bad weight cut as we're all alluding to,
sure,
he's got to let his body heal, and then he's got to put on appropriate weight. You can't just not cut weight. We saw it with Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz. Just not cutting weight sometimes just doesn't work.
Yes,
you have to be a middleweight frame.
Mm-hmm.
Khamzat needs to build himself into a middleweight frame. We spoke about it last week, I think, or a couple of weeks ago with how sort of thin light heavyweight is.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just not cut weight because, let's say he faces Paulo Costa. Paulo Costa is going to cut down to 185, make 185, blow up to 200 to 205.
Yeah.
If Khamzat just doesn't cut weight, he'll blow up to 188, 190 perhaps. And, John Jones is doing it right. He's taken 2 years out of the sport, probably going to be near on 3 years by the time he comes back. Mm-hmm. He's built himself into a heavyweight frame. He's put on a lot of muscle, a lot of size. And we might even need to cut down to reach an appropriate sort of weight for his fight weight. But he's done it right because he's now in a heavyweight frame to deal with the likes of Francis Ngannou, Cyril Gane, Tom Aspinall, Tai Tuivasa, Curtis Blaydes, these guys. He hasn't got that sort of skinny light heavyweight frame anymore where he could deal with an Anthony Smith, a Thiago Santos, a Dominic Gray for a year or so. So I think I agree with you. I think that Paulo Costa fight probably is going to be next. The fight to make is Colby.
I agree. Colby has said nothing on Twitter. I can't believe this guy's dead silent. Oh, you keep cutting out. What's going on?
Ooh, we're back.
Frazer! That's okay anyway. You still there?
Yeah, all good, mate.
All right, cool. Because we actually have a really interesting fight to talk about now. We have any of the bantamweight division. I'm so pumped to talk about this fight. And we almost I don't think we're going to, there's not enough time, but it's a really interesting fight. Cory Sandhagen versus Song Yadong. It's coming up this weekend. And I love it. I think this is such a good matchup. Is there any other fights that we want to talk about on 279? I will say that Ian Cutelaba and Johnny Walker, two cavemen, good job. One of them figured out how to grapple. Daniel Rodriguez, Li Jingliang. Anything that we want to say before we move on?
I don't think so. I think, they're the two highlights. I thought Norma Dumont was absolutely phenomenal against Danielle Wolf, but this is what happens when you put a girl that's 1-0 and has only fought one professional fight on the Contender Series in 4-ounce gloves. She tried to shoulder roll because she's had so many boxing fights, and Norma Dumont just lands and cracks her. Chris Barnett, great win, great celebration.
Yeah.
But Chris Barnett misses weight by 1.5 pounds or whatever, gives up 20 to 30% of his purse. Khamzat Chimaev misses weight by 7.5, gets his whole purse and probably a bonus, but it is what it is. And I think I was a little bit disappointed in Hakeem Dawodu. I don't think it appears as if he's never going to actually live up to the potential that he's potentially got. He's finished one fight in the UFC thus far. I was there for his debut in London where he got guillotine choked in 39 seconds against Danny Henry. He got clipped and then just choked out straight away. And I mean, he's good, but I just don't think, he needs to risk it a little bit more, in my opinion. And Julian Erosa just I know it sounds ridiculous, just beat him. Just beat him in that first round, just beat him in that second round, probably beat him in that third round as well. 30-27 across the board.
Sucks.
It's a bit disappointing, really, for me, because I could see Hakeem Dawodu maybe going on to bigger and better things than Julian Erosa. No disrespect, but he just couldn't.
I know he has so much potential, but just no urgency in what he's doing. He needs to light a fire. Something he needs to light a fire, and I'm not sure what he needs at this point. He's in a great division in the UFC. He's well respected by people who follow the sport. Yeah, we're all wishing the best to Hakeem. So.
Yeah, for sure. And you went 15 minutes with Movsar Evloev. That some of the best don't go for 15 minutes with Movsar Evloev. And
he keeps really good. Is the thing. It's like he's just a little bit more aggressive.
Just needs to put that foot down, I think, and needs to maybe work. I think I know he missed weight, but he's ripped, so he could probably even put on some size to maybe put a little bit more power down in his shots. But it is what it is with Hakeem. Hopefully, he'll bounce back with a couple of wins and potentially become ranked and get an exciting fight. But yeah, like you say, moving on, Sandhagen Yadong.
What a great fight this is.
This has gone so far under the radar because, not gonna lie, the rest of the card pretty shit. But
pretty bad. This fight is great though.
there's fighters and single fights on the card that I'm looking forward to that we'll mention. But the main event it's all about the main event. Sandhagen, it's surprising to see that Sandhagen is without a win since he knocked out Frankie Edgar, because both of his fights were so close against TJ and Petr Yan.
Losses in which his stock was still raised despite losing. And even if you talk to 3 different people, you'll get 3 different winners in that fight. You know what I mean? Those are close matchups.
Yeah. And, it's just, like you say, yes, he's on a 2-fight losing streak. Has his stock gone down? Absolutely not. I think this one is going to just be, averages takedowns per 15 minutes. Cory 0.71, Yadong 0.45. This is going to be this fight's going to be taking place on the feet. Yep. And it's crazy to think the volume that Cory Sandhagen can put out and yet still be so effective with that volume. Occasionally you see like a Diaz volume, where a lot of the shots are hitting arms and he's not really all that effective. And yet you've got Cory Sandhagen who's putting out volume here, and it's almost all effective. He lands a lot of significant strikes. We saw the state of TJ Dillashaw after that fight. We saw, Petr Yan's not an easy guy to hit. No one's beat up Petr Yan on the feet. Yes, Aljamain Sterling beat him, but that was through the wrestling game, really. And he marked up Petr Yan a lot on the feet when they fought. He landed 169 significant strikes, 172 total strikes. You don't land on Petr Yan that frequently if you're not a good striker.
That's the thing.
And Cory is.
Cory is also good at using his physical gifts. He's longer than everybody else, and he's focused a game around jabbing, around front kicks he uses a lot of, and he doesn't plant his feet and throw, because that would be a major weakness for someone that long. But he moves his feet well. Even against TJ Dillashaw, he was moving his feet well. TJ had to wrestle in that fight to pull off the win, because I think he was getting outstruck on the feet, or it was very close. But the only dominant moments were TJ wrestling, right?
Yeah, for sure. And and like you say, he's constantly he doesn't plant his feet like you said, and he can avoid shots by switch hitting. He'll throw a 1-2 and he'll from the orthodox, and then he'll switch out, go southpaw, throw a couple of jabs out there with his right hand rather than the left. And
love it.
Which is his better stance? I could not tell you, because he is so effective out of both, and that is what makes him such a difficult person to stand in front of. Song Yadong, I think, is going to have a real task on his hands. He's a lot shorter, 5'11" for Cory Sandhagen, 5'8" for Song Yadong. He's got a 3-inch reach disadvantage as Yadong. But he hits hard. Song Yadong hits hard. And we've seen it. He's finished 2 straight fights, Julio Arce and Marlon Moraes. Marlon Moraes, that was this year. So, it's not as if, and he's only 24. That power is only going to get better, or that power is only going to get more. He's only going to get more powerful. The sort of more adult man body that he sort of has, and yes, he's got that one blip in his record against Kyler Phillips, but that was a strange old fight. Kyler Phillips, Song Yadong, just didn't seem like Song Yadong really fancied it. But he bounced back against Casey Kenny, like I said, Julio Arce and Marlon Moraes.
Yep.
He's going to be a problem, Song Yadong. I genuinely think that. Training at Team Alpha Male, great gym for the sort of lighter weight guys.
Yes.
But I just think Cory Sandhagen, you can't go 25 minutes with Petr Yan, 25 minutes with TJ Dillashaw, knock out Frankie Edgar, finish Marlon Moraes in the main event. Yes, he lost to Aljamain Sterling, but he's preparing for an Aljamain Sterling fight. Rafael Sunsao, John Lineker,
Yes.
I think Cory Sandhagen's experience is just going to be too much for Song Yadong.
that's the thing of when I was squaring up this fight. As much as I like Song Yadong, you have to pick Cory as the smarter pick. He's got better wins. He's got much better losses. You can see him using his length very well. Now, what we can say about Song Yadong is that he is young, and every fight he's improving. From the Marlon fight, he improved a lot from the Julio Arce fight. From the Marlon fight to now, you have to assume that he's improved a lot in between fights. So even though we're saying Cory's probably the smarter pick, if you are a betting guy, Song is a perfectly fine underdog. And
Without a doubt.
And he still packs a ton of power. He's good at counter striking. If there are moments in this 5-round fight where Sandhagen doesn't move out of the way in time, Song will knock him out. Song actually definitely has it. This is why it's such a good fight. You can see all these different factors happening. You can see a ton of things happening. Honestly, I'm just going to pick Song. Fuck it. I pick Song. Right into it. Song, I'll take him by TKO, which I know. Piotr Yan, my pound-for-pound boy, has never done it. No one else has been able to do it. TJ wasn't able to do it. And I'm going to pick Song Yadong to do it? Screw it. Whatever. Song, 5th-round knockout or something weird like that. No, his cardio hasn't been that good. It has to be a 1st or 2nd round.
I'm kind of glad that you have, because I am picking Sandhagen, so at least we can have that debate next week on, we'll watch the fight on Saturday night or Sunday morning. Unfortunately, it's not. If you look down the card, that is not a get up at 3:00 card. I can tell you that for free. But and a win for Song Yadong, I think, does a lot more for him than it does for Cory Sandhagen. Song Yadong ranked number 10 at the moment. A win over the number 4 ranked guy puts him probably at number 5 or even number 4. He jumps straight into that title picture, 4-fight winning streak, including a win over Cory Sandhagen.
Mm-hmm.
I think for Sandhagen, a win over Song Yadong probably just gets him a Merab Dvalishvili fight. That's realistically where we're looking now, or maybe a Marlon Vera fight. But there's so many exciting fights. We always go on about bantamweight, how exciting bantamweight is, and looking down the card, there's Chidi's fighting in the co-main event. A win over Gregory Rodriguez puts Chidi in a phenomenal position. He's undefeated in the UFC. I know you picked him as our sort of halfway year awards for breakout star. He's 2-0 in the UFC. But if you look at the guys that he's beat in the UFC, Marc-Andre Barrios, who's on this card, and Dusko Todorovic.
It's not bad. It's on card.
I mean, they're names, though, that you've heard of, at least. For two of your first... I mean, I'll be honest, I'd never heard of the 2 guys that Paddy Pimblett fought on his first 2 fights.
No.
No. But, I think the only thing playing against Shitty is he's 33. He's on the sort of back end of his career, as it were. But, you've got that fight to look out for. You've got Aspen Ladd returns, who I still think can be a player if she just gets her weight into. But, I don't see her making 135 with any ease, unfortunately. And then I think the only other fight on the card to look out for is Maria Agapova versus Gillian Robertson. These girls, it's a late notice fight. I think Robertson was supposed to be fighting Melissa Gatto. She pulled out. These 2 girls used to train. Agapova stepped in. Agapova came on to the UFC scene and battered and dominated Hannah Cyphers. And then she's famous for losing to Shayna Dobson in the biggest. I think Shayna was the biggest underdog in UFC history, and she lost. And then she bounced back against Sabina Mazo when she pretty much knocked her out and then took a neck. But then she lost against Marana Moros last time out. Agapova's still got quite a good future ahead of her, 25. Mm-hmm. But I think Gillian Robertson deals with her on the floor pretty handily. And, I think most of the fights on this card, in my opinion, to look out for are the female fights. You've got Loma Lookbomi fighting. Probably, potentially the smallest woman I've ever seen, Danielle Taylor, compete in the UFC. She's 5'1". If Denise Gomez, I think, making a UFC debut. To be fair, she's only 5'2", so it's not exactly. I think that's a good fight. I think it's an exciting fight to look out for. But we've got that fight night. But if you only watch one fight night this week, I'd say it's this one. I don't. There's a big boxing card on. I've got no interest in it.
There's a kickboxing card. I'm interested because I'm a dork, but it's not that big of one. I know the main event is really good on this one. I think this is a great main event. And even if Yadong loses, I think he's probably still going to have a great career. Sandhagen still has a great career. Such a good division. Now, breakout star of the year. I was just thinking about this. I thought, then breakout star of the year. What about Molly McCann? If she beats Erin Blanchfield, I don't think anyone has their stock has risen more than Molly McCann in the entire year, right? Of like it deserved, not deserved, wherever she's going in the future. Breakout star, it has to be Molly McCann, right?
I mean, she's 2 spinning back elbow knockouts in your career is impressive. 2 back-to-back is phenomenal. If she beats Erin Blanchfield, like you can already tell that her stock's rising now because they're not just holding her on into a match to compete on the next London card. They're sending her over to New York. You know, you can tell how much her stock, and it's not like Paddy Pimblett because she's fighting people that we've heard of for a start. Yes, Jordan Levitt's someone that we've heard of, but Molly McCann, you know, Luana Carolina, and then Hannah Goldie. She's fighting good girls.
Yeah,
but yeah, I think the fact that they're now moving her into the US into November's MSG card, I think is a really good sign of how much faith they have in Molly McCann to sell tickets. To be honest.
And outside of Dorks, you probably didn't know her very well in 2021. 2022, she's what we talk about all the time now. Every week, I'm just like, what's going on with Molly McCann? And she's cool. She's a cool person.
Yeah,
anyway,
without a doubt.
But yeah, it's a great fight tonight. I'm really looking forward to it. Anything else we need to cover off before we head out of here?
I think we can just pass a short comment on Canelo Triple G3.
It's just around the corner. I can't believe how close it is.
You can't believe how close it is because no one's talking about it because it shouldn't be happening, in my opinion. Up at super middleweight, you know, Canelo coming off the loss to Bivol, Golovkin coming off the win over, I think, Murata last time out. I think that was it. Yeah, Murata last time out. Golovkin's 40 years old, fighting at a weight that he hasn't fought at for as long as I can remember at super middle. Canelo is fighting at super middleweight, having come down from light heavyweight. It's not a good fight for Gennady Golovkin. I think the first couple of rounds will be pretty nip and tuck like they have been, but these guys don't need to they've got 24 rounds that they previously fought to know what each man did. At this point, Golovkin isn't bringing anything new to the table that Canelo hasn't seen from him before. And the same with Canelo. We know that he's a vicious body puncher. We know that he can end the fight in a matter of seconds. But I guess what's good for Golovkin coming in is he can see what Bivol did to Canelo and try and implement that into his own game. But at 40, is he really going to try and change things up like that to go one more and beat Canelo? First fight, draw. Come on, it wasn't a draw. Second fight, Canelo win. Come on, was that really a Canelo win? Golovkin's got to be thinking that I've got to probably put him out just to get a draw. And like I say, how much has Golovkin got left in? I think Canelo wins this, and he might even stop Golovkin, and we'll see. I think regardless of how this one goes, I think Golovkin retires because, 40 years old, he's going to get this one last payday from Canelo and then ride off, in my opinion. But, we'll break the fight down next week on the card. I'm not sure if there's a UFC card in 2 weekends' time, so we'll have plenty of time to do some analysis rather than previews next week. And it's just I just don't like the fight itself. But as you can tell, my enthusiasm for the fight isn't exactly. It's not exactly. I'm not brimming with enthusiasm, but it is what it is. We need to see a third fight. This one for me is 3 years too late, but it is what it is. I'm glad that Golovkin's getting another payday, and hopefully Canelo can bounce back and continue to be the biggest star in boxing.
Let's say I know very little about boxing. Let's just pretend for a minute. I know it's hard. Pretend I know I can get excited by this fight. I just see the two names and I go, oh, that's a fight. That's a good fight. Those guys are big names, aren't they? Those guys are both like multi-divisional champions. You and I in the know that this is like it's not that good of a fight. But I think this is the thing of boxing business. This is not a sport. This is to sell pay-per-views. Does it succeed in that goal? Does it succeed?
I think it does. I think it does. If you look at the guys that Canelo's faced since beating Golovkin, you've got Danny Jacobs, you've got Kovalev upper weight, you've got Callum Smith, Yildirim. Billy Joe Saunders and Caleb Plant, and then he went up and dared to be great against Bivol. And there's rumours of him fighting Makabu up at cruiserweight at one point. Dared to be great against Bivol, came up short. If you look at who Golovkin's fought, I think he's only had 4 or 5 fights. Yeah, he's had 4 fights. Steve Rolls, Davorenchenko, a guy, I'll be honest, a Polish guy, I can't even pronounce names, Cezar Meta. I've never heard of him. He was undefeated at the time, but undefeated records in boxing mean nothing. He retired in that fight against Golovkin, then he retired in the fight after against Jaime Munguia. And then Murata's a good win, Olympic gold medalist, but he's already picked up 2 losses. Hassan and Dam and Rob Brand. I think if you pitch this one as, the trilogy fight that we all want to see, to the casual fan, it definitely transitions over into I want to watch this. Canelo coming off a loss. Oh, what has he got left? Is he going to be a shadow of himself? Of course he's not. It's a completely different way. It's a completely different fighter. Bivol was always going to be too big for him. I thought he'd beat Bivol, but Bivol has got that size advantage over Canelo. The Triple G won't have. With that being said, this is a DAZN pay-per-view. So you not only have to have your DAZN subscription, but you then have to pay the pay-per-view on top of it. So I'd be interested to see how many pay-per-view buys it does, because I'm not sure how much DAZN is. I think it's a couple of quid, £6 a month or something like Fight Pass. But on top of your DAZN subscription, you then got to pay however much for the pay-per-view, which is skeptical to say the least whether people will do that.
So it sounds like you're pretty pumped for it from the sounds of things.
I'm just not. I've just got a notification on my computer that Anthony Joshua has now accepted the fight against Tyson Fury. Not even official, and I'm already more excited about that fight than I am this one. So
okay, well,
I'm already looking forward to December 3rd more than I am this weekend in the world of boxing, but it is what it is, I guess.
A little bit grim outlook there. I mean, look, you got Song Yadong on the other side. How do you not love a Cory Sandhagen Song Yadong? It's so good. Bantamweight. Oh, it's so fun. This is the best.
That's exactly what I'm saying. If there's one fight to tune in for this weekend, it's the UFC. The UFC have, in my opinion, beaten boxing this weekend, even though boxing have got the bigger names and the bigger card. The Sandhagen Yadong is far better, and I think we'll get, I think that'll be a banger. I think it goes all 25 minutes, and I think Sandhagen beats him. But it's a far better card or a far better fight, in my opinion, more competitive than Canelo Triple G, despite the fact that these guys are pretty much drawn 2 fights. But it is what it is, I guess.
Rough times indeed. All right, from Frazer Krohn, from Tim Wheaton, MMA Sucka, all these good lads. Let's get out of here. Frazer, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.